This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, good afternoon, Steve Laffey here. Great to be back from a slight hiatus in my trip to New York City and New England. Not that I don't love traveling sometimes with my kids, but if you haven't been in New York City recently, wow, around Christmas time, I've been there many times, but I haven't been there in years. Grand Central Station and getting on the 6th line in Lexington like a sardines. It's like the movies you see. It's like I used to live back in the old days, back in my 20s when I would be rushing around trying to save, coming in from Connecticut, especially trying to save like 1 minute to get to work. So I took my kids to all different sites within New York, then headed back up to my old haunting road, which was great seeing some of my friends, just the greatest people in the whole world. Very sad to see the roads. Not a single road has been paved in Rhode Island since I've been back a couple of years ago. But in New York, I just think about how many people live a life, not that they can or can't, or maybe they like it, of just absolute running and running and running to catch that train. I did it for 5 years, and I couldn't do it for one day more. I had to get out. I had to go out and, by the grace of God, met up with Alan Morgan and Morgan Keegan and left New York City as a working place, headed to Memphis. But it was great to be back. I mean, some of the, even I, at my ripe old age, I enjoyed going to the Museum of Modern Art and seeing, everybody wanted to go to the Chinese. I didn't want to go to the Chinese. I wanted to go to the American exhibits. So we went there and see Gilbert Stuart, his paintings of George Washington, there's several of them. Just amazing stuff. But the thing that sticks with me is just how many people are just running and just being jammed like sardines still in the number 6 train going down Lexington or whatever it's called. And I was one of them for a day, for an hour, for 20 minutes. And if I can avoid that again, I will. But you can't avoid it, by the way, if you travel in New York City. Sometimes around 4 o'clock to 5:30, man, you can't catch a cab. So you got to go down and get in the subway, which, gets you going and get you there. There's no more tokens there, by the way. I don't know why they took them away. But anyway, it's great to be back. Great to be back at 5,000 feet. Great to be back with some weather being warmer. And great to not be in a traffic jam like I was heading up to Boston, heading back from Boston Friday night. Some of my great friends and Professor Larry, who we spent some time with. So it was just great. But today we have a great show, I hope. We're LaffeyRadio.com. We always try to think of new topics and how we're going to solve these problems. Sometimes it's not about solving a problem by doing anything other than stopping what we're doing. And we're going to be talking about the minimum wage today in the United States of America, and talk about it in the context of where it's come from, where it is, and why so many people come up with so many ideas in America that are against the law of human nature. They're against anything that any economic student would learn in his first class, and just against common sense. So, when you look back I look back on my life, and when I got my first job, I had a number of very, I guess you'd say, poorly paying jobs. But what was I, 16 years old? My first job, I guess, was scraping pans at Rainbow Bakery. And I'm sure they paid me the minimum wage. I think it was $2 and it was 1978. I suppose, I'm guessing it was $2.70, $2.80. But what was I trying to do? I mean, first of all, that was fine. I mean, I was just going to get a job. I needed a job. I needed some money. But more important, I had to get myself into the workforce. I didn't even know that. My father told me this. I had a paper route, but generally speaking, it was a way to get. So I went over to Rainbow Bakery, and in Cranston, Rhode Island, my hometown, and I started off by scraping pans, minimum wage, scraping pans. It was like 4 hours a day, and I guess I scraped them pretty well. But that combined with a guy they had to fire who was burning the bread. If you've ever been in some of these big bread machines, you'll notice that these big bread machines you've ever seen, when they go all the way to the back with the bread, and if you keep it in the back too long, you'll burn it. You can't get it back in time. It's very hot in those ovens. So they asked me if I'd want to go over there and be a baker's helper. I said, fine. Well, within 2 weeks, never forget this, I was working so many hours, I found myself taking a bathroom break, and that's where they kept these, and you've seen them probably, every minimum wage or law that they have about employment laws is posted somewhere. And at Rainbow Bakery, as my memory was, it was right outside or right inside, probably right outside the bathroom. I remember staring at it going, wow, I worked more hours than I'm supposed to. I worked more hours per day than I'm supposed to, more hours per week. I've broken every single law in this chart. And I got double time on Sunday, a time and a half, when we went overtime for 8 hours. I'd go at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I wouldn't leave till like 1 o'clock in the morning. The people who ran the place were wonderful people. I never had an issue. They get all the free food, by the way, I could eat. And so I think they understood this one thing about bakeries, too, that, eat all the food you want. And so I'd be eating muffins, and about a week into the whole thing, you're like, oh, my gosh, I don't think I want any more muffins. I don't think I want any more of this. But I never got sick of the guy making the donuts. I'd wait around a couple of extra minutes while we pack the bread, wait for the bread to cool, and I get like 2 or 3 donuts for my ride home. At 16, you could do that. Next job I had, I went down to the unemployment office, which nobody does anymore. Got a job cleaning bathrooms the next summer at United Parcel Service. Minimum wage. Did so well there that they asked me the next summer to clean the entire warehouse, which was a full-time job. And I think it was probably minimum wage too. Maybe it was a little more. I don't know. But what I really was learning was my way to get it to work on time. Show people that I had a good work ethic. Get good reviews from the people who were my bosses. Use them as, the first resume that you have. No different than today. My son turned 8. One of my sons turned 18. One of them is 24, but one of them is 5. But one of them turned 18, so we hey, nowadays you start off with, let's get a bank account. You saved us some money. Let's put it in the bank. Let's get a little debit card. Don't even use it. Just use it once a month and pay it all back, or a credit card. Get him set up so that when he's 23, builds a line of credit. So if he has to use it, he has it. But my point is that the minimum wage was never designed back then in the 70s. And by the way, it wasn't designed, I don't think, in 1938 when they started the Minimum Wage Act. I think it was 25 cents nominally. It's about $4 in today's dollars, I think. And it's going up and down in terms of real terms. The highest was 1968, and then many years they just didn't raise it. But in my lifetime, as I went through, I didn't make minimum wage as I got into the workforce. Even the summers after, they gave me a raise. Why? Why'd they give me a raise the next summer at United Parcel Service? I didn't even work for United Parcel Service. I worked for Empire Cleaning Company. And most of the guys, they were a little bit older. I had experience. In fact, it got to the point in my 3rd summer that I went to the guys who ran the joint and said, listen, you gave me 8 hours to clean this entire warehouse. And it was a little bit hazardous. There was this old truck I used to drive. I shouldn't say a truck. It was a propane-powered truck that's not only swept but put water and cleaned the grease on the floor. I guess you could have got hurt there. I used to slide down these slides after I greased them with whatever you greased them with, so I wanted to check if they could. I actually like riding down the slides. So where the packages go, I would check for where packages might have fallen between the cracks. I'd ride down the slides. But my point to them was, if I finish this job, do you care how long I stay? They're like, no. You know what you're doing, Steve. This thing's done. You can leave. So I came into work with boots on, work boots, short pants, a T-shirt, and the trucks would pull out. Mr. Ferns and the gang, they'd pull out, guys that I knew, and I would clean the warehouse. And I'd leave in it'd take me about 4.5 hours, 5 hours, not 8 hours. So effectively, I nearly doubled my wages. That's what generally happens as you work at a place. And so to think ever that the minimum wage was designed to feed a family of 4, it never was. And it's a very inefficient way to do so. But every couple of years, and this goes back to January of this past year, so nearly a year ago, where President Obama in his State of the Union address went over why he wanted to raise the minimum wage. In fact, we have the clip of that. I'm going to play that now. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to play it now. Here's Barack Obama in the State of the Union address, about a minute long, about what he wants to do to raise the minimum wage.
Let's declare that in the wealthiest nation on earth, no one who works full-time should have to live in poverty, and raise the federal minimum wage to $9 an hour. we should be able to get that done. This single step would raise the incomes of millions of working families. It could mean the difference between groceries or the food bank, rent or eviction, scraping by or finally getting ahead. For businesses across the country, it would mean customers with more money in their pockets. And a whole lot of folks out there would probably need less help from government. In fact, working folks shouldn't have to wait year after year for the minimum wage to go up, while CEO pay has never been higher. So here's an idea that Governor Romney and I actually agreed on last year. Let's tie the minimum wage to the cost of living so that it finally becomes a wage you can live on.
Except, folks, really none of what he says is true. You're not really going to raise the incomes of millions of people. Right now, about 4% of people working are a minimum wage. The average wage in our country is about $23. The median wage, median meaning half of the wages above and half are below, is about 16 and change. Never, by the way, hear all the people clapping? It's basically just simply a political issue. Raising the minimum wage, and it's a very, and I don't, we don't do graphs. Maybe we should have made a graph up for you, but it's very simple. There are really several scenarios of raising the minimum wage. You have a supply and demand curve in all economics, and as wages were to go up, demand for people who make that money would go down. If you lower wages, demand for wages for those people will go up, and you have a supply curve, and you put wages on one axis going up and down. Wages, which is really your prices, and the quantity of what's demanded. And you look at your supply and demand curves. If you set the price in any industry, now, by the way, for miners in our country, what percentage of miners make minimum wage? It's near zero. Almost no. I mean, it might be somebody. But for restaurant workers and it always goes back to McDonald's, by the way. All these arguments go back to McDonald's, and somehow McDonald's is always the catch-all phrase. But raising the minimum wage simply means that employers will find a way to have less employees. And the people that it really affects the most are the young people. Unemployment of young people is in the high teens. Unemployment of young minorities in the cities is in the 20s. And every study will show you, like little Steve Laffey from 1978, that the way to get these guys into the workforce is to have them, they don't produce $7-8 an hour. But when you raise the minimum wage above that equilibrium, supply meets demand, and by the way, when you raise the minimum wage, you're not going to affect the miners. I mean, miners making $7 an hour. I mean, a couple. But you're going to affect people getting into that entry-level job, which could be a McDonald's job. And yes, can McDonald's absorb that if it went from $7.15 an hour to $8 an hour? Probably. But the people at McDonald's will once again be thinking about how they can automate more. They'll think how they can have less employees. And the young person like me doesn't get into that workforce, doesn't do what I did those 4 summers I just explained to you, and maybe never, gets the kind of training that I got. And people, by the way, talk about McDonald's all the time. It's a great training ground, or Burger King, whatever it is. But it's also small coffee shops and service agencies around America. Guys who fix lawnmowers, who want to hire a 16-year-old kid, they can't pay him. The kid doesn't know how to fix a lawnmower, right? How do you pay him $7 an hour when he doesn't know how to fix a lawnmower? If you could pay him $4 an hour, you could get some help. And then the kid could raise his wages. Anyway, we're Steve Laffey here. It's Steve Laffey's Fixing America, LaffeyRadio.com. We appreciate everybody liking us on Facebook and following us on Twitter, all at Laffey Radio. Just think Laffey Radio. We've got a lot more ground to cover because the sinister notion of what goes on with this minimum wage, we've got to cover and we've got to expose. And we'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it. In the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
Students, when I call the reason for your absences throughout the years, please exit the auditorium without your high school diploma. Too tired, family trip, sick day, starting the holidays early.
Starting in the 6th grade, students who miss 18 days or more of school in a year for any reason will fall behind and risk not graduating high school. How many days of school has your child missed this year? Absences add up. Keep track at boostattendance.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
I'm in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm one out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry. There's enough food in this country to feed everybody. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
There are a lot of business models that are built on a workforce, an entry-level workforce. Fast food is a great example, where you pay minimum wage, and every time that minimum wage goes up, the business owner has essentially 2 choices: either raise prices to everyone or cut some people out of the workforce, and that happens.
And this latest increase is meant to offset inflation. Guy.
And local business owners, how are they responding to this impending increase?
Well, a majority of local business owners I spoke with, we're talking about niche boutiques and small cafes, are frustrated. One cafe owner tells 9 Your Side the increase means she'll be working more hours and her hired employees less. Guy.
Thanks, Corey.
Steve Laffey, welcome back for the second segment today. It's a beautiful day here in Fort Collins. Hope it's great where you are. We're talking about the minimum wage laws, and we're trying to explain why, although politically popular, you heard Barack Obama, everybody clapping about raising the minimum wage and talking about you can raise incomes of millions of people. Basically, I mean, I hate to say this, a lot of this is a bald-faced lie. Do you realize that it must be about most of the people on minimum wage are young people who are in their first job, who are part of a family that makes like $53,000 a year, $2,000 more than the average family. Minimum wage is 4 million people. There's 100 and some odd workers in America. And there are other basic things to talk about with minimum wage. These people who keep proposing it are almost all the progressive left-wing people who purportedly want to help the poor people. But I got to tell you, it seems like they don't. You couldn't find, and we'll get to one economist in a second, you couldn't find serious economists who would say anything other than, now, by the way, if you raise the minimum wage from $7.15 to $7.20, all right, whatever, okay? You start going to $10 when the median income wage in our country is $16, you're going to be hurting people. You're going to be hurting poor people. By the way, we already have this thing called the Earned Income Credit. It's designed to be a tax credit for people who are the working poor. So a family of four, I didn't bring the numbers in, but a family of four would get, as they move up the economic ladder, would get less of a tax credit. Now, there's all kinds of negative incentives in that, but that is a more effective way to fight poverty, to give them a credit on their taxes as people move up the economic ladder and get them out of poverty, than anything to do with the minimum wage. The minimum wage, I mean, look at the unemployment rate today in Providence, Rhode Island, in Detroit, Michigan. Go look it up. It's in the 30s. Kids, young people can't find, and this is among young people, they can't find jobs. But yet it never ceases, it'll never cease to amaze that people will come up with time after time after time reasons to raise the minimum wage, and they'll have nothing to do with economics. For example, I mean, I go back to, this is the business section of the New York Times, where you would expect, I know left of center versus, say, right of center, Investors Business Daily, but you would expect someone writing for that to give you economic reasons and business reasons to raise the minimum wage. In an article by Eduardo Porter, one of their senior writers, December 10th, 2013 of this year, he starts off the article that's entitled Dwindling Tools to Raise Wages. Senator Ted Kennedy, okay, stop. First three words. Senator Ted Kennedy, God rest his soul, passed away. Once called, why would you cite Ted Kennedy as a way to raise wages? He was a senator for like 30 some odd years and did nothing but a terrible job for the working class people of America. Senator Ted Kennedy once called minimum wage one of the best tools for fighting poverty. So what? Who cares what Ted Kennedy called it? Is it? No, it's not. Poverty's at a 2-decade high. This guy goes through all the reasons that I don't have to go through. The share of poor working age Americans at the highest since 1967, according to a new study at Columbia University. The sobering reality, he writes, raises two questions. First, can the minimum wage be raised significantly without prompting employers to dump workers, close franchises, and replace cashiers with computers? Question mark. No, the answer is no, by the way. He knows the answer is no. I'll go on. Second, could minimum wage play a significant role in mitigating poverty, perhaps slowing the widening gap in American incomes? No. He knows the answer is no. Neither has an easy answer. And get this from an economics writer. This is, by the way, fairly typical of the people who want to raise the minimum wage to, now we're hearing about $15, some $10, and so forth. Perhaps now this sentence is an all-timer, okay, so listen closely. Quote, perhaps the most compelling argument for raising the minimum wage is simply this: it's worth a try. No economic reason. It's just worth a try. Like, let's just take some money and whip it into the wind. We did it with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Whip it into the wind. Did it with the TARP program, TARP. Cash for clunkers. Home buying credit. Whip it into the wind. Just keep trying things. How about Eduardo Porter? How about just going back to basics that work? This guy writes like a long article on the front page of the business section. Less than a week ago, or about a week ago, December 10th. Never mentions China. Doesn't know what to do. And never mentions China, ever. By the way, he's so inconsistent. These people who write this stuff are so inconsistent. He writes about Sweden. And he acknowledges that Sweden has less, now again, we get back to McDonald's, less McDonald's per person in Sweden because they do have higher wages over there and so forth. And then he acknowledges that Sweden has no minimum wage. It's a totally inconsistent article. And he can't, by the way, he'll go through the article and he'll find people that totally make the argument that minimum wage can't really work to help people out of poverty. In fact, will hurt people. Because think about it. Think about what it really does. And this is why, conservatives have to do a much better job, or realists. We have to do a much better job as a realist, as a pragmatic, as a populist, whatever you want to call me or whatever, anybody who talks like this. Because when you talk like this, you're going to get booed in different places. There's going to be people showing up. There's going to be unions like the SEIU. They're going to be militant unions. And they're just going to pour it on. They don't care at all about the truth. They just want more money for them. And they want to cause basically strife in America. They say they're out organizing people and they raise their wages. That's not really, they want more union dues for power for them. So when you say the things that I'm saying today, in most cases, if you ask people in a poll, should minimum wage be raised? Yeah. If you explain to people what happens and just grab one single diagram, people will look at it and go, well, no, I guess we can't do that. And there are other reasons. This guy, he doesn't understand anything. First of all, China, I mean, it goes back to, we do have the lowest rate of wage increase. In fact, we have no wage increase since 2001, 2002 to today. When did China enter the World Trade Organization? 2001. There's been a giant gap in a loss of $37 billion a year and like 3 million jobs over that timetable. And it's never in these articles. It's never in these articles. It's not in the press. China gets in the press of all the things that they're doing to oppress people, all the things they're doing with their communist country, and what they're doing with their military force, what they're doing, by the way, with our warships, cutting in front of them, nearly causing an accident the other day. I bet you no one listening even knows about it. An accident, an incident, we'll call it. Not an accident, wouldn't have been an accident. And testing the will and resolve of America, forget all that for a second. But the fact that they pay $1 an hour and we pay $16 an hour, we matched these two countries up and we gave the guys who made $1 an hour a 40% discount. That's what's been the major detriment to rising wages in our country. But that's still not the minimum wage. It's a boogeyman. It's something that people like to talk about. It's a Jesse Jackson showing up, once in a blue moon to attack some civil rights thing. It's not really a civil rights argument. It's the same concept. And these people will continue to do it without the facts. And you'll meet up with people all the time who have no facts. In fact, I should play this well. People show up all the time. Here's one. Here's a clip we're going to play. Here's out in just a little while ago, an SEIU protester. I think he's out in Seattle. They want everybody to make $15 an hour. And here's the clip. Listen to the protester and why he's there.
How's it going, everybody? Why are we here today?
How you doing?
Why are you here today?
Why am I here today?
Yes, sir.
I support working people.
Do you support the wage increase to $15 an hour?
I'm not sure.
Because I was thinking, I'm going to have a hard time getting to my $1 McDouble if the guy making it's making $15 an hour. I mean, am I wrong? I'm wrong.
He seems to think, my point is the people that are responsible for making that $1 McDouble, I want them to know that I'm on their side rather than on the company side. I want like food purity.
Right.
If they're pissed off at their employer, they could be doing something to their food that is not good for them.
So that's your main concern, is that if they don't get what they want, they might contaminate the food? I guess that's a legitimate concern.
Pissed off employees do pissed off things.
The man protesting, like many protesters for the SEIU, they're on the side of someone, but they don't even know why they're there. They don't have a coherent argument. There is no coherent argument. They're just there, and this guy can only cite that he wants, I guess, food purity. So if ticked off workers are contaminating the food, I guess that'll be a problem. I mean, we have millions of people eating all kinds of food all day long, and we do have some problems here and there, but that's his argument, not an economic argument, just an emotional argument. And we've got to get in this country to have some of these arguments be economic arguments, because I don't want to see any further these kids in any inner cities not getting into the workforce. And right now they can't. They don't produce $7 an hour. And I know, I mean, I live this whole thing. Go to any of these small companies. And by the way, a lot of this, we can talk about this in a little bit after the break, a lot of this, big companies, large corporations will deal very well, relatively speaking, with a hike in the minimum wage. They've got the money to automate. They've got the cash. What do the small companies do? They try their best, and many of them go out of business and lose market share to people like McDonald's. Anyway, we got to take another break. We'll be back. It's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Thanks for tuning in at Laffey Radio. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k. What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that, do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's like tiny nails in the air poke my lungs. I start to cough. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
Today, 1 out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma, asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place mission first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army Strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Well, in other news, hundreds more Fresno County workers are looking to leave their union tonight. This comes just a month after another group of workers announced its plans to leave the same union. KMPH News reporter Ashley Ritchie broke this story last month and has why more county workers say they've had enough. It's a story you will only see here on KMPH News.
Well, back in March, I reported on how the 300 correctional officers at the Fresno County Jail will soon vote on whether or not to leave the Service Employees International Union, or SEIU. Now they aren't the only ones unhappy with the union and looking to start their own.
Hey, Steve Laffey here. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Thanks for tuning in. LaffeyRadio.com. And when we're done, by the way, the show, it's live right now. You can just, it'll be put up in the air and you can just play it. And a lot of people are playing it on their apps. We have a self-loading app. So if you got an iPhone or something like it, you just type in Laffey Radio. It turns into the app, say play now. We also put up a lot of other product. Fixing America Presents, something you can send to your friends rather than a whole show. There's other segments we like to put up, the Laffey Buzz. There's a lot of stuff on LaffeyRadio.com because this is a whole different way of looking at things. You know, rather than doing a radio show like, and not to criticize everybody else, but rather than one where, you know, there's no solutions, we take topics, whether it's the Department of Energy last week or talking about the minimum wage laws today, and try to talk to you about what the solutions are. And obviously the solution here is that the minimum wage laws should not be raised in our country. And by the way, it gets back to this other thing called, if you're going to raise them, let it be a state issue. Gets back to competitive federalism, the word we use now instead of states' rights. I mean, why, if in Seattle, by the way, right now, as we speak, both people running for mayor want to increase the minimum wage to $15. God bless them. That's the city of Seattle. You'll be finding companies located right on the outside of Seattle. I mean, it's an expensive city anyway. But they'll have to compete with the city next door that won't do that. In Milwaukee, Milwaukee literally right now, there's a new county ordinance proposal, and I got this out of the Milwaukee paper, and dated literally, I think, yesterday, Sunday's paper in Milwaukee, that could tank building development, but would benefit again this relatively new union that was formed several years ago, the SEIU. And these guys are really, I have to call them names, but they're quite frankly as close to communists as you can get. That's what their whole culture's about. There's tapes you can play of them talking about how they want to really instigate trouble. And what they want is power. They don't really care about the workers. Everybody knows raising the minimum wage doesn't help workers, but look at what they're trying to do in Milwaukee. This is what happened. This happened in my city, in Cranston, in some way. A minimum wage ordinance in Milwaukee County would increase the tax levy by $8.4 million per year, cost taxpayers $80 million over the next 10 years, according to the nonpartisan controller's office. They're going to set at $12.45 an hour, or 110% of the poverty level for a family of four. The wage mandate is expected to pass the county's finance board, even though, by the way, and it's going to come to a full vote. I think it's going to probably be voted on tonight and on Thursday. But you've got companies, a guy with the Red Fox, a developer named Rick Barrett, says he won't say whether the minimum wage would kill his $160 million development, but there isn't a hotel around that would be able to work with such a mandate. And it goes on about all the businesses it's going to kill. But guess what? The unions love it. Look what the unions want to do. They spent all this time and money to drum up support for it. And why are they involved? Specific language in the resolution carves out an exception for employees who are covered by a collective bargaining agreement between employer and a quote-unquote bona fide union. He writes, sounds like a pretty good deal for SEIU, the union that wants this. So get this. If a company wants to be exempt from the $12.45 minimum wage mandate, all they have to do is sit down with a union, get their employees in a union, hammer out a collective bargaining agreement for less. The company gets to avoid paying more, and the unions get to grow their dues paying membership. Everybody wins, Reddy writes. Not if you're a Milwaukee taxpayer. This is what they're doing. They're not in it for the poor black kid in the inner city of Milwaukee. They're in it for themselves. And they've got to be exposed. Time after time after time, they've got to be exposed. Around this country, I faced this when I was mayor, in a different way, not about a minimum wage, but about unions only wanting bona fide unions to be able to do any business in Cranston. And they kept all the small businesses out. They wanted power. We defeated them through my Guatemalan American friends and the Urban League and a bunch of other people came in to help us, and we defeated them and the city changed the city council vote and got it straightened out so that we could have smaller companies bid on things like building a roof. But here is just another example of why this goes on. It is not about helping the majority of the people. And then when you ask yourself, just think of all the things that happen when you raise the minimum wage. These people would like you to think that everybody can get a living wage, but the bottom line is this. And I don't mean to say flipping hamburgers, but some of these service jobs, like I talked about that I had growing up and you had growing up, they weren't designed. They don't meet a market relevance of paying a wage for a family of four. They're just not. They're starter jobs. I don't mean to say that, but you get out of prison. You're 25. You don't have a skill. And on parole, maybe there's a way to say, listen, if you pay this guy $3, we'll pay you $3 to get this guy into the workforce so he's not committing crime. But when the minimum wage gets set to $15 an hour, you've got a lot of people that can't work. And the other thing no one ever talks about, none of these people talk about, let's say you're at McDonald's. Let's say you're at any one of these restaurants. And you're making yourself, you're making $16 an hour, $15 an hour. So you're close to the medium wage of Americans. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. As a whole, we talked about China. We'll talk about the competitive nature of this country and how to bring manufacturing jobs back, because manufacturing jobs pay far more than the average wage in America. And we keep losing on manufacturing jobs. That's the issue for everybody. That's what we need back in this country, manufacturing jobs. We do build airplanes, but building the supplies for the airplanes, building tractors, et cetera, machine parts that we use. We need to build them. So say you raise the wage to $15. What are you going to tell the guy who's been working there for 3 years? He went from $7, $8, $10. He built up a skill level. He's managing something, but he's making $15. What do you tell him? He's going to have to make 22. How do people survive that? And the people that are so unrealistic, we got a whole segment we got to play. Here is Senator Warren, the new senator out of far left senator out of Massachusetts. And here's her talking at a conference. First of all, she's got her own economist in, some young guy out of University of Massachusetts who was in her back pocket. And I guess he's getting all kinds of accolades for saying that raising the minimum wage doesn't cause anything to unemployment. It doesn't raise unemployment at all among young people, whatever. It's what he says. He writes articles about it. He now, because of it, looks like he became a tenured professor because of it. This is a whole other show. This is how academic works. Barack Obama cites him. He's a nobody. He knows he's never worked a day in his life. He's a nobody in economics. He's not Keith Arrow. He's not the late Milton Friedman. He's just some guy. But because he takes his point of view, he's part of this interview. Let's play some clips. We're going to play a lot of these. I'm going to play this whole interview. But let's start with Senator Warren talking to Doobie about the minimum wage. This is her economist friend. This is a Senate hearing where some restaurant owners are in. It's about March of 2013. Let's look at Senator Warren, what she wants the minimum wage to be.
Joe, I was very intrigued by the chairman's chart earlier about productivity. And it shows, as I read the numbers, and also as I read the numbers that you cited, Mr. Dubé, that if we just started in 1960, not the high water mark for minimum wage, but a good time on minimum wage, if we started in 1960 and we said that as productivity goes up, that is, as workers are producing more, then the minimum wage is going to go up the same. And if that were the case, the minimum wage today would be about $22 an hour. So my question, Mr. Dubé, with a minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, is what happened to the other $14.75? It sure didn't go to the worker.
Thanks for the question. That's correct. Since early 70s, what we have seen is a divergence in the prosperities of different sections of our population. So, for instance, had the minimum wage kept
scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty Five. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
I'm always up for a challenge. It's the feeling of accomplishment that drives me. And there's no better challenge than serving part-time in the Coast Guard Reserve. I protect my country, work with the best and brightest. I get great pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Should New York's lowest paid workers get a raise? It's a question Albany lawmakers will debate this year, and there is a new proposal that would raise the minimum wage from $7.25 to $8.50 an hour. Fact finder Alexander Field reveals that New York's business advocates are pushing back on this one.
It's no surprise that if you put it to the people, the idea of raising the minimum wage is popular. Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver agrees. He's introducing a bill that would raise New York's current minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $8.50. He's also calling for an annual increase to the minimum wage to adjust for the rate of inflation.
Economic arguments aside, this is ultimately a matter of human dignity.
Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Thanks for coming back. You heard state senator out of New York just recently talking about raising the minimum wage. And again, like I read from the New York Times, where the writer of the New York Times business section says the best argument is it's really just worth a try because he's got no other ideas because he knows nothing, it looks like, about economics. And the economists are totally against him about raising the minimum wage. We're here at LaffeyRadio.com, and we just can't believe what we hear. Here's a man who gets interviewed proposing raising the minimum wage in New York and says all economic arguments aside, which is, I mean, it reminds me of trading on a trading back in the trading days where, everybody was having a bad month and everybody, I guess, was short. And they were talking about the CRB, the Commodity Research Bureau Index. And one guy says, he was short it. He was like, if it wasn't for gold, the thing wouldn't be up as much. And the guy added up, if it wasn't for corn. And the CRB index is made up of all different commodities like corn and oil and sugar. And another guy added in, sugar's made an unusual high because of a shortage and so forth. They were all just talking their game. And one guy finally said, Joel Sheriff, as I remember, said, yeah, if we took all the ingredients out, it wouldn't be up at all. Well, in a similar vein, all economic arguments aside, why would you make them aside? Why wouldn't you put forth an economic argument that this would be better for the American people, better for the people of New York? Because he knows it's not. So as the beginning of the clip shows, it is. Listen, if you ask people, should you raise the minimum wage? Well, yeah, sure. Hey, should we lower the retirement age for Social Security to 60? Yeah, why not? I mean, then we explain to people what it's going to cost and how many jobs you're going to lose, especially when you really. And this is where people who are talking about the minimum wage like I am, you've always got to turn it back to people and say, why are you taking young people and not letting them get into the workforce? Why do you deny human nature? And where do you get off setting the wage rates? I mean, the next step after setting the wage rates is you're going to set the prices you can charge. Then you're Venezuela. I would say we'd be much better off if we just kept things the way they are. I mean, you're probably never going to roll it back. Just kept the federal minimum wage the way you are. Let the states argue. If Seattle wants to go to $15, if Milwaukee wants to raise the minimum wage to $12.75, and this guy who's about to build a $160 million investment says, you know what? I don't have to be in Milwaukee. I can be in the next city, right over the edge. Here in Fort Collins, we've got a city next door called Timoth. Timoth only has a couple of things. They got a Walmart, and they're getting like something else. But it's such a small city that when Walmart didn't want to operate in Fort Collins, they found a much cheaper way. But the bonanza for Timoth was huge. I don't know if they pay property taxes in Timoth. They may pay nothing. Whatever they pay, it's far less than even the low tax, relatively low, relative to where I've been down in Memphis and in New England to there. So, but anyway, we were talking about Senator Warren, who was totally off kilter. But there's a couple of clips we just have to play before we get out of here. Here's one more talking to her economist at the Senate hearings.
Dr. Dubé, in the studies of what happens when minimum wages have been raised, and you've done the county-to-county matches, were restaurants included in the employers in the measurement of whether or not people were laid off?
Restaurants were one of the primary samples that we looked at because of the high incidence of minimum wage workers. And again, restaurant employment in response to the kind of minimum wage changes did not respond on average. Now, again, is it possible that a single employer didn't lay some people off? Is it possible that some employer didn't actually expand That is difficult to say. The point I'm making is on aggregate in the restaurant industry for the kind of minimum wage changes we saw, we did not see employment change noticeably.
Okay.
Is it possible? Of course it's possible. I mean, here's an economist who's denying basic economics, that when you have a supply and demand curve and you raise the wage rate above equilibrium, that you're going to have a surplus of unemployment. That's what you're going to have. And what he fails to take into account is all the other added in variables. People don't change their employment the next day when these things happen. They just start looking how to mechanize, how to have less employees. They also, by the way, stop breaking the law, pay people under the table. Happens all the time. We don't capture that income. So it goes on, by the way. This interview goes on, and there's a longer clip. It's my great frustration, so I want to play this for you before we run out of time. You have to listen to a CEO of a restaurant come in and be grilled by Senator Warren in March of 2013, and he makes the mistake of switching the argument around. Listen to this.
During my Senate campaign, I ate a number 11 at McDonald's many, many times a week. And I know the price on that one, $7.19. According to the data on the analysis of what would happen if we raised the minimum wage to $10.10 over 3 years, the price increase on that item would be about 4 cents. So instead of being $7.19, it would be $7.23. Are you telling me that's unsustainable?
Senator Warren, not all restaurants are created equal. I'm in the full-service restaurant business. McDonald's has efficiencies, and they operate completely differently than I do. I have many jobs that pay well above the minimum wage. We have a retirement plan. We offer health insurance to our salaried employees. So my business is a little different. I can't raise a 4-cent price. I mean, I don't operate like a fast food restaurant. So I would hope that you at least appreciate the distinction.
So, well, I do appreciate the distinction, and I'm not going to be in the business of being McDonald's representative, but I think they would talk about also having some higher paid jobs and some opportunities for management and advancement as well. But I get your point. Maybe it's only 4 cents on $7.19, but if your entrees are $14.40, we'll see how fast I can do the math. Are you telling me you can't raise your prices by 8 cents?
You know, it's typically when costs rise, we don't actually raise it just 4 cents. We might actually go a little higher. It has an inflationary effect on the economy. So you may actually be taking away the money you just gave that employee through the minimum wage increase and raise prices throughout the economy.
So this restaurant owner comes in to get grilled by Senator Warren, and he starts talking about inflation, which, by the way, is not the argument. Instead of looking at Senator Warren in the eye and saying, what am I doing here? Like, why don't I get to set with my relationship with my workers what they make? What are you asking me this for? And by the way, Senator Warren, do you know how small the margins are in most restaurant companies? I'm not talking about McDonald's. You know how small they are in most, you know what? Restaurants go out of business all the time. It's hard to keep workers. People move around. People's flavors change and what they want to eat. Leases. I mean, again, there's many, many variables. Senator Warren, the Democrat out of Massachusetts, is living like in the old Soviet Union. That's her game, I guess. You know, and she wants to set the price that these people can that people can charge for labor, and she wants to set it above to totally put the screws to the younger inner city minority workers in this country. And she doesn't even know. She has no idea about the relationship between the minimum wage and what someone's already making. So when they raise it to $10 on this guy, he's got people who started at 7 who are now making 10. It's not just that initial working making 7. Very few people, percentage-wise, make the minimum wage. I did when I was first starting out into my late teens. And then, you know, I made more. In fact, I made less actually one summer when I taught at Hotchkiss, or assistant taught at Hotchkiss and took care of a dorm. I worked about 80 hours a week. I got, I think, $600 for the summer. But you got paid a salary instead of an hourly wage, I guess. So I probably made about $2 an hour. It was a great job. Free food too. It was great. So, but why do CEOs still come into the U.S. Senate on issues like this and allow themselves to be grilled, get defensive, and switch the topic toward inflation rather than saying, ma'am, I'm here to just tell you, I shouldn't even be here. You have no right to sit here and grill me. And by the way, if McDonald's is such a despicable outfit, why is the senator eating there every single week in order number 11? If they're treating their workers badly by only paying the minimum wage, which is what she's saying, why does she eat there? I mean, she says she ate there all the time, the number 11. I never eat there. I ate there once because this year. I ate there once in 2013. Don't want to go into it, but I wanted to go to the Subway, and the guys wanted to go stop there, and they took 20 minutes to make a fish fillet. Whole nother topic. But it's, by the way, it's terrible food. But why is she eating there? You know, where are her clothes made? Why isn't he coming back to talk to her about? Does he not know enough? I mean, it's unfortunate. Maybe he doesn't know enough. But it's no longer time to get in front of these people if you run a business and be nice. There is no more time in this country for the Senator Warrens to be treated like they're kings and queens. I mean, they need to balance the budget. They should be working on something else. This isn't a topic that's going to be helpful. I had no idea.
Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network LLC is prohibited.